out David, they were heavy, at least for me, they were heavy in my heart. Man, I need that stuff. I want that stuff. I want faith. I want to trust. I want to be a man after God's own heart. I want to change. I want to grow. I don't ever want to stop. I'm telling you all, listen to me. This stuff works. Okay? It's the best way to live. It's the best way to raise your family. It's the best way to be happy, to have a joy. It just you can't go wrong doing right, and you can't go wrong pressing toward the mark, growing towards the Lord. But here, 1 Samuel, it's a little different. If you was going to title it, it would be like godly friendship. I can't just jump over this. There's a little bit to it here that I think we need to talk about, that we can make a big deal out of. Not that friendships are not a big deal. Man, are they. And they're rare. And we talk about that every now and again. But 1 Samuel chapter number 18, look at verse number 1. Not anticipating being very long. Let's go ahead and read about 9 verses, and then we'll look at a few things. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1, and it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Man, that's just some unreal writing right there. And that just, people just don't talk like that anymore. And people sure don't live like that anymore. It's always selfish. It's always me. It's always, well, no, because I, and man, oh man. Verse 2, and Saul took him that day and would let him go no more home to his father's house. What day? Well, real quick, the day that he killed David and Goliath. And you probably know that, but just reminding you, the day that David had returned from a slaughter of the Philistines. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was David. My wife looked at me and got me all choked up there. Like, what, did I mess up something? Verse 54, and David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. He went and took it to Saul, and after that day, they had that conversation. He wouldn't let him go home no more, and that was the day that their heart got knit. Verse 2, and Saul took him that day and would let him go no more to his home, to his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his girdle. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him and behaved himself wisely. You see that all through the scriptures talking about David. And he behaved himself wisely, and Saul set him over the men of war. And he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. And it came to pass, as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day forward. Boy, what a sad portion of Scripture. You go from a beautiful portion of Scripture to what a sad. Saul didn't have a clue. Can I just tell you, when you ain't right with God, you ain't got a clue. I'm just telling you, he was a man of God. And boy, a man of God was he. Handpicked by God. Chose it. Head and shoulders above the rest. I mean, he was a goodly man. Watch this. But then he got away from what was right. He got away from God. And the next thing you know, his thinking is messed up. It's foolish. And David's a man after God's own heart. David's the guy that, man, just blessing after blessing after blessing when it came to Saul. David was the type of man, if Saul had a good head on his shoulder, if he had his head screwed on correctly, facing the right direction, he'd have recognized how much of a blessing David could have been to him, even more so than he was. But anyway, I just want to show you a few things. Namely, how God works when we think He's not working. I'm just telling you. And I don't know about you, but every now and again I get that way. Now I know He's working, but I think it might be not working fast enough, or maybe He could or would or should speed it up a little bit, or whatever the case may be. David and Goliath, right after God knits the hearts of David and Jonathan. The fight with Saul, listen, he knew that God knows everything. Y'all know that. And so he anticipates all this. He knows all this. He knows David's life's fixing to get tough. He knows he's fixing to go through a super hard time. He's got a lot of stuff that's going to be piled upon his plate with his own son still in the hearts of the people. And I mean, just what a mess. Saul hunting him down like an animal and just on the run. And he's anointed king. He's the king by all rights. He's already been anointed. God just said, hold on, I want you to learn a few things, and I'll put you in that spot in due time. And so I'm just saying this right here. God knows. God knows, listen, when you need something. God gave this fellow a friend. Can I just say this? When you're in a trial, God, He gives help all along the way. I'm telling you. And you know, I don't really know how to put this exactly, but a lot of times it may be a big trial. Maybe it's going to be a long trial. I'm here to tell you, don't get your blinders off, okay, like them horses. Take that thing off, because I'm here to tell you God puts blessings all along the way to sustain you until He brings about what He's going to bring about. You young people, a lot of times that's your parents or your preacher. Definitely it's the Bible, okay? And it can just be way out of the blue. I'm telling you what, he woke up that morning, he didn't have any friends. His own brother was fussing and pointing his finger at him. And by night's end, he had the best friend that anybody could ever imagine. That's the way God works. Still, he had a long, hard road to hoe. It was coming. But God would give him things all along the way. It ain't a coincidence that morning his brother was fussing at him either. Okay? And then that evening, God gives him a friend like we probably can't even really imagine. Knit their hearts together. Literally, that means woven for a cause. And by the way, Jonathan, he probably will get preached about a little bit more, to be honest. I'm just thinking that. I don't have much to say about him tonight, but I'm standing up here thinking, man, what a man. Okay, that would just forego, and we will talk about this a little bit, but what would just forego all that he could have held on to. But I think he's seen, that fellow's right. There is a cause. Remember he said that? Is there not a cause? Jonathan was like, man, it ain't what I thought it was, but now I do see what it was. It's your God. I mean, just a lot to that. Now, let me give you a couple of things and we'll go to house. First of all, look, the entering of this friendship. Chapter 18. We read it, but it's verse 1. Look again, it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, woven together for a cause. A very unlikely pair they were, if you think about that. Jonathan was a proven war hero. I believe he loved his dad. There was no jealousy. Even though he should have been one of them that went up there against Goliath. His daddy did should have been. He was the king appointed, or still on the throne at that time. But to be honest with you, it's a good thing that Saul or Jonathan or none of the rest of them did go down there and fight the giant. Because they'd have lost. Because God had already said what he'd said about Saul was done. Jonathan did. He hadn't got this yet, but he gets it now. There's a cause. Everybody else was ready to tuck tail and run. Nobody was trusting God like we started off this thing. David was all by himself there, tending the sheep, getting right with God and staying right with God and growing close to God. And just, look, I'm just telling you, he was much older than David. If you study the Bible out, you'll find that. He was a prince. David was a shepherd boy. I mean, just two totally different people. Just what an unlikely friend. I'm just saying it's an amazing thing that God did. Those fellas had zero chance of winning if they'd went down there. But like I told you last week and the week before, David had zero chance of losing going down there to fight Goliath. It was an unlikely pair. God did something in the heart of Jonathan that you and I need in our heart. Proverbs 22:1, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver or gold. Jonathan wasn't stuck on his own flesh or his own fame or power or money or his own flesh. Did I say that? Or his own flesh. We ain't got to worry about power and money around here. But his own flesh, yeah. Proverbs 18:24, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly. I'm telling you, this guy, he got friendly. And you want to know why? Because I think he got saved. I think he got right, or if he was already saved, he got right. I think he's seen the cause, and their hearts were knit now over a reason, and it wasn't to take over Daddy's throne. Not a hint of that anywhere. He loved his dad. Even when his dad was trying to kill him, he was trying to talk his dad out. He was loving his dad. He was obeying his dad. He was helping David. His heart was knit. He knew David was right and right with God, and he knew his dad wasn't right with God anymore. What a sad thing. Maybe he wasn't even saved. Maybe I know this. He wasn't raised right. This entering into this friendship, Jonathan's heart is now right. It's not selfish. And so you'll get this, watch this, number 2. Because of that, the expression of his friendship. We'll stay here for just a little bit longer. Let me say it was very unselfish for Jonathan to do what he did. I don't know. He didn't see that nothing could be gained, but I don't think he saw what all was going to be gained. And man, oh man, son was a lot to be gained. How about this word, Mephibosheth? I mean, even after everybody was dead. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I'm saying this, he's about to give up everything. You know what I mean? He's about to, the throne, the whole, chapter 18, verse 2, 3, and 4, and Saul, verse 3, and Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. Verse 4, look at this. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David and his garments, even to his sword. I'm telling you, he had a prince-type sword. He had prince-type garments. He was the king's boy. He was making a statement there. He was saying, I understand what your God's up to. I want to be on your side. I love my daddy. I'm not going to disrespect my daddy, but I'm telling you, I'm on the Lord's side. He said, here, you can take my place because that's the place God's given you already. Took off his kingly attire to be a king and gave it to him. I'm telling you, listen, when you're willing to strip it all down, give it all up, man, you're entering, listen to me, you're preparing eternal blessings from God that you and I can't even dream up. We can't even, the Bible comes right out and tells us that you can't even imagine how good it's going to be in heaven. Well, the Bible talks about what you do here, storing up treasures in heaven. The more you do here, the better it's going to be there. But I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about all along the way too. Remember 2 Samuel chapter number 9 and verse number 1, David said this, is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness? Didn't stop there. He said, for Jonathan's sake. Anybody, I don't care who it is, I don't care how wrong they were, is there anybody in the house of Saul? I want to be kind to them because I love Jonathan. Jonathan's dead now. When Mephibosheth was brought in, David said, I want to give you all Saul's property. I don't know about you, but I figure Saul owned a little bit of property. Matter of fact, if you do the research on it, you'll find that Ziba, however you say it, the servant that he commanded to take care, him and his family to take care, he had like 20 sons, I think. Sons and daughters, maybe it was a mix. I'm telling you, it was a lot of people to tend to, because Saul had a lot of land. He had a lot of stuff. He ate at David's table. I know y'all know this, but I want you to think about it for just a few minutes. How many of you know this part right here of the story? That when Jonathan came, he got all that stuff. I mean, he was treated so kindly by David gave way more than he was supposed to get. You know, I mean, by rights, kings would just kill everybody that still had to do with the lineage of the former king. Do you know what I think? I think that when David found out that it was Jonathan's boy, I think it don't get. It was Tammy. We can't really. I've read it and checked it and looked and searched. Really doesn't say. But I'm here to tell you, I think you're going to get to heaven and you're going to find out that he had a plan in place. But when he said, "Oh yeah, there's one named Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul," I think he was like, "Oh man, am I going to spoil him?" How many of you know this part of the story? Mephibosheth brought his boy. It's easy to read over that. It's there. Jonathan's grandbaby is sitting at the king's table. You know why? Because he was willing to strip it all down and give it all to God. That's why. Dead long time, and now look, I'm talking about blessing after blessing after blessing. It just keeps on going. That's a sacrifice. I thought I wrote. I'm going to read it to you because it's good. We ain't going to be too long. So, when, I can't think and turn pages at the same time. When Mephibosheth was brought there, y'all remember what he said? He said, "And David said unto him, Fear not, I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and will restore to thee all the land of Saul thy father, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually." And then Mephibosheth, the Bible says, verse 8, "And he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant that thou shouldest look upon such a dead dog as me, as I am?" Let me tell you, you're the boy of my best friend. You're the boy of a man whose heart was woven together with mine over a cause worth dying for. It'd do us good to really, really, really start to believe that we're in a spiritual war. That this is really a cause, that it really takes an army, I know what God can do with one, but I'm telling you, it'd do us all well in this church to figure out this right here. It's a war. What a sacrifice. Unfortunately, most of us don't really know what, I mean, we're so blessed. It's, we give a few dollars, we give a little effort here, a little time there, a little whatever ride here, but I made a statement earlier, we all got an invisible line that's drawn that needs to go away for good. It needs to not be a line at all. It needs to be whatever you say, God. But like I said, everybody wants to serve God, but they want to serve God on their terms. And their terms is, God, I'll go this far. Or, God, I'll do this if you let me know how this is going to turn out. Me and Dassa come over to the shop today for a few minutes. She had her recurved bow and her Robin Hood thing on her back. She was trying to kill a groundhog. That wound me up, Jamie. That was awesome. And she came over and I was listening to David Gibbs was preaching, and she hung out with me there for a little bit, and we was listening to him. I said, "Listen to this story." Backed it up. And David Gibbs tells this story of this lady. She's a missionary, and she said, and I don't remember all the details, but she was a missionary to this place where nobody, they had been pushed out. Matter of fact, they was doing some oil drilling, and these cannibalistic were killing the oil workers and eating them. And just, nobody would go. You know, they pulled the oil rigs out. They pulled none of the big missionary, you know, sending people. They quit financing. They quit sending because people were dying. They were eating them. And this lady, she said she was called to go. She was going, but nobody would send her. Nobody would fund it. So she did it herself. She hires a helicopter, and it's one that used to fly them oil workers in and out. And a bunch of people's pleading her not to go. You can't go. Listen, they're going to eat you. Do you understand that? They're not going to just kill you. They're going to torture you, cut pieces off of you, and eat you. It's like, she said, I'm going. So she hires this helicopter, this oil worker, to fly her in there because nobody would support her. And as a last-ditch effort, he's telling her, he's saying, listen, ma'am, you shouldn't do this. You know, he's flying, and they're there, and they're almost, you know, drop zone. They're fixing to bring her down and let her out. And he's saying, please don't do this. Please don't. Listen, I'm supposed to come back and get you. Okay, and he gave a date. He said, but the deal is going to be this. I'm going to come back, but you're not coming back. And he gets all choked up, and he says she looked at the helicopter pilot, and she just smiled. She said, thank you so much, son, for your concern. But I don't have to come back. I just have to go. Okay. You know, we hear stuff like that. Yeah, well. Lord help us. I'm telling you, though, when you do that kind of stuff, God takes care of you. The story doesn't end there. David said that he drops her, he leaves, and he comes back at the appointed time, and there she is. Don't always happen that way. Sometimes you go to heaven from the will of God. It's appointed unto men once to die. But oh, what a time she'd had at the judgment. Amen. You know what I'm saying? If she died like that. But the story is kind of comical, to be honest with you. This is kind of the way God is, if you ask me. So he's back, and there she is. And she comes in there, and she's like, you know, the story, what's the deal? And he's got to let her, hey, here's the deal. Little did anybody know that this tribe had a 400-year-old tradition, religion, whatever, okay, that a goddess would be brought from the sky by a bird and dropped in there. And when that helicopter let that lady out, they all run to her and started worshiping her. I mean, she was like, oh, no, hold on, let me tell you. She said it was the easiest soul winning you ever had in your life. Said everybody in the whole tribe got saved. Because they was waiting on this, and this is the time this goddess is supposed to drop out of the sky, and here comes this lady. Golly. You say that don't happen. You don't know who God is. Come on. I'll absolutely get on board with you and say, you know, yeah, okay. That makes you go, whew. You know, I mean, okay, just go ahead and push that old nasty, rotten flesh out of the way. And just because the prayers that you've seen answered weren't quite as big as that one, God still answers prayer, and He can still do things exactly like that if He wants to. Jonathan was just making a statement. He was just saying, David, I want to be like you. I want to know your God. I love my dad, man. He's great, and he done a lot of good things, but I won't be like that. I want to be a man after God's own heart. I want to follow you because you're following God. Matter of fact, I want you to be the king in my place because God wants you to be the king in my place. Let me give you the last one. The example, I said, the entering of the friendship, the expression of this friendship, the example of this friendship. This event took place thousands and thousands of years ago, yet still here it is, an example to us. You never know how much of a friend you could be or how much it helps folks when you are their friend. When is the last time You just felt the need to be friendly, and you prayed and asked God to show you a need. You said, but preacher, every time we help somebody, they don't show back up, or they just, I didn't ask you that. I know. I get it. Know this right here, and we'll quit. The Bible talks about the Lord being a friend, one that sticketh closer than a brother. Boy, did he strip it all off for a cause. What in God's name's wrong with us if we don't want to give in here, we don't want to give in there, we want to fuss about this, or we want to balk at that, or we want to... It's kind of crazy. So, yeah, but it just ain't the same. Oh, but it is. It's the same as it's always been. God ain't changed a bit. Not that he owes me anything, not that he has to prove anything to me, but boy, I sure like it when he does. And he does. Just like he rewarded Jonathan. Man, I could preach a whole series on benefits Jonathan got that he didn't have a clue about. And the older I get and the more God allows me to see, I'm just going to tell you, that are results, direct results from how I've lived my life for the last 15, 20 years. Man, what a blessing. Miss Tammy, the only thing I wish I could do different is start about 30 years earlier. He loves you. Stand on your feet. You can come.